Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. Many companies are adopting influencer marketing these days, a strategy where companies target people on social media who have a lot of influence over potential customers in their particular industry. Our guest today is here to tell us more about it. Please welcome Gary Lancina, Senior Director of Global Brand and Influencer Marketing Strategy at Mercury Marine. It's nice to have you with us, Gary.
It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Well, let's start with you because you have quite a background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm originally a left coaster, came from California and transplanted here to the Midwest a number of years ago, and have enjoyed a nice career in marketing, including quite a bit of influencer marketing and sponsorship activity. Landed at Mercury Marine 2.5 years ago, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the experience there.
What company were you with that you got into influencer marketing?
Probably my first real exposure to the space was when working at SC Johnson in Racine, Wisconsin.
Oh, sure. We all know that, right?
Great company, had a great time there, spent quite a bit of time on the personal care brands that SC Johnson owned at the time, Edge and Skintimate. And that got me involved in things like automotive sponsorships, NFL relationships, and even minor league hockey. So quite a variety of activities there.
So tell us a little bit more about your vision on how influencer marketing works.
I think to speak to that, I'd back up and say, ultimately for me, marketing is about establishing productive and mutually beneficial relationships. And framing things like that guides all of the thoughts that we as practitioners of the craft have in terms of appropriate influence. Because much like in your personal life, you want to find voices and you want to be able to bounce ideas off of folks you trust and people who seem to have some validity and authenticity in their perspective. They don't always need to be right, but they need to be open, they need to be engaging, they need to be trustworthy and not shilling or overly pushy about any particular item. And, for me, that's really a guiding principle in any influencer relationship, whether it's with an organization or an individual, is how relatable are they? How authentic are they? How trustworthy are they? And how honest will they be with the people who will look to them for influence?
Yeah, I think that's important because, you look at, I guess you would call it influencer marketing, but, when you watch a NASCAR race, and after the race, when the guy awkwardly tries to get every sponsor that's on his shirt, into the answer of every question that he's getting to, I think that loses something. I think authenticity is really a key, do I believe that this person really uses the product, likes the product?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that in our space, there are any number of examples where it's obvious that money has exchanged hands.
Right.
And, those can be awkward. And in social media, you'll see tag farming where somebody will put a post up and include, let's say, 20 different potential sponsors or brands. Those types of posts, although they show up in social media tracking, are not going to hold the same kind of impact as a really targeted and relevant bit of content. Or to use your example in an interview, somebody saying something very sincere about a particular sponsor or two. And I think that the best influencers out there understand that and have a way of articulating the benefits of a particular sponsor, product, service, or brand in a way that is relatable and memorable for the members of the audience.
So how do you find them, Gary? I mean, do you start by looking at the number of potential audience they have, or are you looking for something else?
It's a variety of different considerations that go into establishing a productive relationship with somebody who could be construed as an influencer. And it goes well beyond social media and the number of followers. There are people out there who will boost up their followers via a variety of different tactics, but they end up almost with a bloated audience. The first line number might look big, but in further exploration, their audience is not all that engaged, is not sharing or responding to posts. And so, whether it's for Mercury Marine or it, was in prior positions in my career, I've always tried to bring a mentality that goes back to what I just talked about, that we're establishing relationships. people talk about brands the same way they talk about friends and family members. We use the same verbs. I love this. I'm committed to that. I'm loyal to it. And so anybody who's going to play a role in influencing or augmenting what that brand stands for needs to be able to productively and very openly interact in ways that are going to generate those same positive verbs. And so, we look beyond things like just the number of followers. We'll look at history, legacy in a certain activity area. We'll look at what their peers say about them, because in many cases we may be interacting with other folks in the space. And then, we'll look at a little bit of back history to see what their character is. There have been times in my career where we've had to either decline or alter a relationship because of character issues, and others where we can stand by someone because of character issues, even in some tough moments. And again, I think that all matters. So we try not to put too much emphasis, and I personally try not to put too much emphasis on any single aspect, because I think that's unfair to both the brand that I might be representing and to the audience in general, because we could look at some personalities with big Twitter followings, for example, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be relevant or appreciated by the audience we're catering to.
So when you find somebody, what's your strategy for connecting with them? I mean, they don't know you from Adam, so.
Well, it depends. I mean, in some
their
cases,
brand's pretty well known.
The brand is, yeah.
At one point in my career, I think I relied very heavily on agencies to broker introductions and to work through the agents for influencers. So whether that was a prominent athlete or a musician or someone else. But then you find yourself in other circumstances, and I think the space where I work now at Mercury Marine, I think it's fair to say that there's a smaller population of really strong advocates for that space and enthusiasts. This is not NFL football
Right.
in terms of the number of fans. We're not going to get the same viewership for the Bassmaster Classic as the Super Bowl is going to garner. So knowing that, it's actually feasible to talk to some of the people with whom we already have relations and ask some questions about other people they know or referrals they might make, in addition to the more traditional reach out to, an agency that represents a number of people. So I would say that it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of establishing initial contact, but it's not unusual for people to kind of come out of the woodwork and express an interest, and particularly if we've done a good job in nurturing our relationship with influencers and theirs with us, it's seen as mutually beneficial. And so a lot of relationships get established because a friend of a friend gives us a call and says, I'd be interested, are you looking for someone in this space? Those are often the most productive leads to follow up on.
If it's a cold call, I mean, do you maybe send them some interesting news, or do you send them some product, or do you just simply introduce yourself?
Yeah, is there any coaching?
I think that is also very dependent on the kind of product or service that's being supplied. So if I was working on a personal care brand and had bottles of shampoo or aftershave or things like that, those are very easy to ship off as samples. When we're dealing with
outboard motor, not so much.
A 300 horsepower outboard engine,
Yeah,
that's a little more challenging to ship off. So, again, I think it's somewhat dependent on the nature of the conversation and the area of interest. Oftentimes, there'll just be a chat about, for a particular influencer, who's your audience? How do they perceive you? How do you perceive yourself? What value do you believe you provide for them? And then we'll have a discussion around a brand and say, well, this is what we represent, and this is how we go to market. In the case of Mercury Marine, very, very high quality products, a long legacy. We just celebrated our 80th year. Our birthday was yesterday. Carl Keypaper founded the company yesterday, 80 years ago. So we have a long legacy of focus on the marine space and innovation, which gives us an incredible amount of credibility with influencers and with end user audiences. And so, that makes for good conversation before we ever have to talk about actually using a product or trying out a service.
and for those who don't know, that was January 22nd.
Yeah, this is recorded, obviously. So
Right. But I want them to know the date.
Happy birthday, Mercury.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
So I would imagine some of your influencers, though, that you would deem important aren't necessarily like again, they said this isn't the NFL, it isn't, professional golf. I mean, it could be as little as like, fishing guide services and different people like that do touch a lot of potential customers of yours.
Yes.
Because I know a few, I noticed a few people. I'm a fisherman. Those that know me know that quite well. But you see people that have, pro staff, on their shirt or something like that. And I've fished some tournaments and things that are, these guys, they're welders, they're mechanics, they're whatever by day, or advertising guys. But on weekends, they're professional fishermen.
Yeah. And, I think for us and for the space in general, I think it's fair to say that there are different aspects of influencer relationships. For many, many organizations, and not just in our industry, a key influencer relationship might be a local guy who is an avid, in this case, fisherman or competitor in a different arena or acknowledged expert. They may be a fishing guide. They may host a locally broadcast television show. They may be active on social media and have a podcast following. And their activation for their relationship might be to go to a local dealer's open house, to go to a local trade show. In the current industry where I work, it's boat shows.
Right.
And that kind of on-the-ground advocacy often, again, goes back to this relationship aspect, has a lot more validity because of the person-to-person contact, because the person, the influencer is perceived as and truly is a member of the community, knows local conditions, can advocate for things. And that can apply across all kinds of industries, whether it's, outboard engines and the controls and rigging that go into boats, or it's snowmobiles, or, lawn and garden equipment. There are all of these industries out there with broad networks of dealers who then have relationships kind of on the ground. And those folks may have social media following that numbers in the thousands or tens of thousands, but not the millions, and are every bit as valid an influencer as somebody who is a nationally known or internationally known personality. So I think that's also part of the magic behind this space, is to understand how to blend and how to optimize the mix of relationships, both for the budget you've got and the impact that you want to have in light of the value chain through which you deliver your products or services to end users. And I think it's fair to say in an industry where the local dealer holds a lot of sway and really can serve a variety of consumers, those localized influencer relationships take on greater importance.
And do you support that local dealer in those efforts if it's going to be a product sampling or payment or any kind of stipend?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Without revealing too much around our specifics, I would say if someone were to look at Team Mercury, whether it's at Walleye Weekend in Fond du Lac in the summer or the Bassmaster Classic, you will see competitors clad in Mercury gear, operating on boats with Mercury engines, and we will have a variety of different ways of relating to them or supporting them. And in our case, we even have a number of television properties and broadcast partners whom we support in influencer relationships as well. And, all of those are productive and all of those are appropriate. And many of them are done in conjunction with partners because we're a brand that usually is put together with another brand, right? Mercury Marine does not build boats. We build a lot of things that are utilized in and on boats.
Right.
So some of those influencer relationships are also common relationships with the boat builders with whom we work.
So, Gary, how do you keep these relationships honest and authentic?
Well, first of all, I think, you got to recruit well. And we like to think that Team Mercury, our group of influencers, are all people of great integrity and character. And I think the other part of it is just to keep the lines of communication open and the dialogue open. And nowadays, one of the advantages of all the information that's available is influencers themselves can self-assess. They can provide analytics based on social media activation or website views or ratings for television broadcasts, etc. And we, on the other side, can look at the same activation with a lot of clarity. As the years have gone on, we get to more and more fluidity and sort of common views of performance which enables then good productive conversation around what do we want to change, what priorities are there, what pilots or experiments are we going to undertake.
So how do you measure the success of influencer marketing? How do you guys look at it and say, we did a good job this year, we could have did a better job? Can you tie it right back into bottom line anyway?
And adding on to that, how successful has the strategy been for Mercury Marine?
Well, I can't speak to the specifics of our success metrics without revealing some confidentialities. What I can tell you is across the different phases of my career, the idea of correlation between influencer activity and in-market results has been a constant theme. In the case of Mercury Marine, if you're curious about the success of it, it's worth appreciating the longevity of some of the relationships that we have. There are members of our team and people who support our brand who have had relationships measured in the decades with Mercury. And I think that that's a real testament to both the influencers themselves and to Mercury Marine in terms of managing those relationships and a common belief and some validity underneath that belief in terms of how the influencers play into business results. I think if you step back and we look more broadly at the space, nowadays there are some areas where analytics can be applied. Click-throughs from social media posts, looking at sources of traffic or website traffic, and looking at the regionalization of certain activities as well, where there are, let's say, regional influencers, and looking at what type of activation or support they've provided, and then what kind of response or resonance comes out of the business side of things. Those are all much more feasible today than they used to be. And anybody who's playing in the space should be paying attention to those types of metrics.
And how exactly, Gary, does it compare with traditional marketing efforts? The advertising that you do typically in newspapers or on the radio, television?
Maybe not newspapers anymore, but...
No. Newspapers are still around. Trade pubs.
I think if we step back there, obviously you know this and your listeners know this as well. Advertising can play a number of different roles. There's equity building stuff, there's a call to action,
right?
And very sort of direct messages. I think in the influencer space, there's also those variations in what's being expected or looked to for impact. When it comes to building awareness of new products, there may be elements that are very specifically pushed out through an influencer network with messaging on them and link requests. Please deploy this through your social media. And we can look at the sources of traffic in response to those types of messages and say, oh, okay, these folks really got their followers activated, and we generated a lot of views of, let's say, a new outboard engine. In other cases, it may be more subtle. It may be looking at equity and affiliations with a brand. Are we increasing trust or decreasing trust? Are we increasing sort of passion for, can people articulate particular attributes about parts of the product line? And there, we may not have the direct line to say influencer X did something and we saw the results, but we can look at, in aggregate, our mix of deployments and compare it to maybe a similar campaign that didn't leverage the influencers at some point in the past. And so you can start to glean a sense of performance from those types of analyses as well.
Do you use any outside tools for measurement of looking at what type of conversations are going? You hear the social media monitoring services that are monitoring conversations that are out there that don't necessarily generate a click through to a website?
Yeah, there's there are the brand watches and the Crimson Hexagon tools out there to do social media listening. And I would encourage everyone to avail themselves of that. If you've got a brand that is a topic of conversation, if you've got a brand that has any sort of fan base, if you've got a brand that has relevance to the end user, it is worthwhile to pay attention to what conversations are happening. And even in a customer service sense, nowadays, a lot of people will take to social media in order to
complain,
express
right.
a concern or articulate a point of delight. But the more responsive an organization is to those types of comments, the better you understand your end user, and in a virtuous circle, the more you understand how to advocate on behalf of your brand with those people, and also how to acknowledge them and take advantage of the commentary that's going on. So, whatever your social listening tool of choice, I would encourage people to take advantage of that and couple it with whatever analytics solution you're making use of on your website, because the cross-pollination between social media and the internet in terms of websites is massive. We talk a lot on my team about the website being like the town square. It's not always where people start, but it's usually where they end up before they choose to go somewhere else.
Right.
And so, we want to be ready for that inbound traffic and to serve people either the content or utility that they need before they move on to whatever else they're going to do, whether that's knowledge and know-how. Or
find a dealer, and then work their way down the funnel, right?
Exactly.
Do you think this strategy of influencer marketing works for any industry?
I think in just about any competitive arena, there are going to be voices who are trusted. And they'll be trusted based on their experience. They'll be trusted based on sometimes their position or which company they work for, or they were acknowledged as innovators. And so whether that's a service organization that caters to in a business-to-business type of climate, or it's something with consumer appeal, I think in almost every one of those instances, there are going to be people who exert greater influence than others. And, they may not all be amenable to a commercial relationship, but it is worthwhile noting that there are influential voices across just about any area of human activity. And so, I think I've said this for a long time, right? We're all human, and we've all been social for a lot longer than there's been social media.
Right.
And so, the influencer idea is not something new. The rapid development of technologies that allow for dissemination and broadcast of information and engagement with a wide audience, that's new.
Right.
But this idea of socializing ideas and having opinions, that goes back to, the point in time when humans started communicating with one another.
Right. I've always told, everybody's heard the old metaphor of, you have a good experience with somebody, you might tell 2 people. If you have a bad experience, you'll probably tell 10. Well, social media just allowed you to tell 10 million in 10 seconds. So that's...
Yeah, it's kind of scary how out of hand that could get real quick. But
I also had a client once came in and said, my bad reviews on Google. I said, well, give better customer service.
You work your way out of that. And, I think that's worth noting as well, right?
Right.
Not everybody's going to be happy all the time, and you can build credibility by leaving that stuff out there and addressing it.
Right.
Actually fix your proposition.
Right.
And
always look at those as an opportunity, I always say. And the court of public opinion is not going to judge you that you had a bad day. They're going to judge you on how you dealt with that bad day.
Correct.
So.
Absolutely. So for anybody interested, Gary, what's the best way to connect with you?
Well, there's not that many Lancinas out there, so if you look for Gary Lancina on LinkedIn, you'll find me. That's probably the best way to connect.
Awesome. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we met a guy whose job was to make sure everybody had fun, and now we're meeting somebody whose job is to foster relationships. I mean, what cool job.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm happy to practice my craft, and I'm delighted to be able to do it for an organization like Mercury Marine.
Well, you're a really knowledgeable guy, and really thank you for your time today. I think our listeners got a lot out of this. So.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Gary. And to anyone listening, if you like what you heard, please don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of local, regional, and global brands on a daily basis. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.